Okay, welcome to episode number 21. And in episode 20, I explained to you what dynamic routing is and how to identify the dynamic parts of a URL. I showed you examples on YouTube and on Facebook. Now it's time for me to show you practically how you can also implement dynamic routing in your own applications. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to go back to using the route decorator to decorate these functions. Not because it is wrong, not because you cannot do the same thing with add URL rule. You can do that. In fact, I'm going to leave the last example and then I'll show you how you can achieve the same thing with add URL rule. But like I told you earlier, 90% of the time you are going to use the route decorator. So I think it's a good habit to develop, and then you can use add URL rule anytime you want to do stuff dynamically. So I have added the route decorator on top of the Morgan and the tag function, and so we don't need line 16 and 17. Otherwise we are doing the same thing twice. It's not an error, it's not a problem, but then why do it twice if you can do it once and have the same output? And it also stops you from adding bugs to your code. So this service here will run exactly the way it was in the previous video, but I want to show you how to do dynamic routing. So I want us to be able to specify a name so that the greeting will be specific to that name. Okay, so I want to see something like Guten Morgen, Edward, Guten Abend, Stephen, or any name that you pass in the URL. So to do that, we need to define a dynamic part in the URL, and then to do so you use these angle bracket. Okay, once you add an angle bracket in the route, then Flask gets to know that that aspect of the URL is dynamic, and so it has to do its magic to make it available in the handler, and the handler is the function that is called in response to a request to this route. Okay, so I want you to include something that I refer to as name. You can choose anything. It should just make sense to your particular use case. Okay, but in this case I want you to go to /morning/ any name. And what happens is that because we have defined this aspect of the URL in angle bracket, Flask gets to know that it is a dynamic path, and every dynamic aspect of the URL is going to be made available to the handler using the same name, the same whatever name you want to use to identify the dynamic route here is going to be given to the handler as well. So what it means is that now our Morgan function is going to have a name parameter. And you might ask, okay, so if Morgan is executed in response to a call to /morning/ whatever name, how does Morgan get the name? And that is one of the magics of Flask. It is going to pass or traverse the URL, and then it will identify all the dynamic parts of it, and it will read them and pass them to the appropriate pass them as argument to the appropriate parameters of the function. So now I'll say Guten Morgen, and I want to greet you personally. So I'll put a placeholder here, and then I'll say dot format name. Okay, so this is how it's going to work. You go to /morning/ whatever name you put here, and because we defined the URL as dynamic using the angle bracket and then we place name in here, Flask is going to match. It will do URL match, and it will know that we are trying to match /morning/ name. So once it finds the route we are trying to visit, whatever follows it is going to be made available as name into this parameter, and then we are making use of it right here. So let's go straight ahead into the browser and then try this out. Okay, so I'm going to start the server, and the server is up and running. So I can come to morning and I'll say slash, let's say Edward, and you can see that it is saying Guten Morgen, Edward. Let me come here and then I'll say Stephen, and you can see that now it is saying Guten Morgen, Stephen. So this is very similar to how Facebook does things. You see that your profile ID is at the end of the URL, and this is how Facebook uniquely identifies your page, and then it uses that to fetch information from the database. So we can also do the same with our code, okay? And it doesn't always have to be strings. I will show you how to use other numeric data types as dynamic aspects in your URL in another video. And in case you're wondering, can I separate this? What if I want a full name? So let's say Steven Sowa, who happens to be my #1 fan. Okay, so once you do this, it is still working because we registered /morning/dynamic name. So what happens is that Flask knows that we are trying to visit the morning, and so everything that follows after the morning is going to be read into the name parameter, and then it will be given to the function so that we can use it. Okay, so let's do the same for afternoon. I can come here and I'll call it name, or you can also say full name. I mean, I just want you to know that you are not supposed to do things in a particular way. You choose what is meaningful for you. So I'm saying full name, but what you should note is that the name you give to the parameter here, the dynamic part in your URL, should match the name you give to your function. Okay, so I'm going to say Guten Tag, and I'll say dot format, and then I'll say full name. Okay, I forgot to do debug so that it will reload for me, so I have to restart the server, and then I can go to tag, which is afternoon, and then I will say Linda has fought, and you can see that it is also working perfectly. Okay, now the final thing I want to show you is how you can achieve the same thing if you use the add URL rule instead of the route decorator. Okay, and it is nothing different. So this is what is defining the path. Okay, so we can come here and then I can say name, and what it means is that the append function should also have a parameter called name, and basically this is all we need. And then I can come here and then do my format here. So once I do this, I'm going to kill the server. Let me clear screen so you see things well, and then I can go to evening, and then I will say Rosina, and you can see Guten Abend, Rosina. So basically this is how to add dynamic routing. Okay, just put them in angle bracket, give them a name, and that name is going to be made available to your handler function when called. So you need to define parameters to accept them, and you can use it with the route decorator, and you can also use it with the add URL rule decorator. Now the final thing I want to close this video with is that you should note that every dynamic path of the URL is going to be given to your handler function as a string. Okay, it's going to come in as test. So in case you are receiving an ID when it comes in and the person visits your URL /12, it is not 12, it is 1 followed by 2. In the next video, I will show you how to receive numeric dynamic paths of the URL. Okay, and then that is what will make it more useful, because once you have it as numeric data type, you can go into your database and find records by ID, find records by whatever it is you need. But I mean, it's a good example for me to show you. So thank you for watching this, and then I'll see you in the next video.